Okay, we are moving on to the reds with winemaker and owner of Stillwater's Vineyards, Paul Hoover, the artisan winemaker, even though he makes a fair amount of wine and grows a pretty decent amount of grapes. Everybody wants Paul's grapes, and when you taste the wines that are in your shipment, you'll see why. You're old school, you're an Aggie. You believe that grapes make the wine.
Yep.
And that's being very modest because I've watched him harvest. He doesn't even let them load up truckloads of grapes. You make them bring them in flat by flat because you don't want them to continue right in the fields.
For our wines and for some of the wineries we pick at 4 in the morning. And I'm old-fashioned, you're right, and it's a lot like cooking. And so if you can visualize a salad or anything else, those crisp, fresh vegetables, I love to use apples as the example. If you cut an apple and leave it out on your table and come back 4 hours later, and we all know that the apples are going to be brown, and they're not going to be bad. If you cut the brown away, there's going to be some good apple behind it. And so as you pick those grapes out in the field, depending on how much you rough them up and stir them around, you are basically breaking them open. You're starting the oxidation process. And so, it's not the end of the world, but everybody always wants to ask me, how do you really make a $35 bottle of wine, or a $40 bottle of wine, or a $50 bottle of wine? And I always say it's a whole bunch of little bitty things. It's not any one magical thing that you can just magically take a wand and say, oh, this wine is so much better. So one of the things is keeping the grapes so fresh that when they first go through the crusher destemmer, it's the first time they've ever broke their skins. And again, so that apple I think is easy to visualize. So if we break those skins right then,
in other words, if you're putting a ton of grapes on a ton of grapes in a big truck and they're sitting out in the field when you're harvesting them, they're starting to crush.
Yeah. And they're starting to ferment and they're starting to do what they're doing, which depending on, it's not the end of the world, but it's that extra little crisp freshness. So what we do is, yes, we bring them in 30-pound trays. They look like you got them from Albertsons or Food for Less. And so they're all intact. And then you dump them directly onto a conveyor belt that takes them up and then starts the process. So from the time they're crushed to the time they're actually in a tank sealed from oxygen, 3-4 minutes. And so that's one of those little specialty things that, okay, is that the secret? No, it's one of the steps that we take.
And I got to tell you, when I came out at harvest season and you were so proud, he's like, Jeanette, feel this tank, feel how cold it is. That's Mother Nature. In other words, the tank wasn't refrigerated, but he had picked those grapes that morning at 4 in the morning, and the temperature was cold, and he had brought those in, flat by flat, and they'd gone right in the tank, and that was the temperature they went in there with, and you were so proud of that. And I just think, and that's why I make good wines. Speaking of, this is your nice blend, which that is his son on the cover of this label that his daughter helped design, which was like 12 years old as a 4-H project.
Yes.
And so in fact, that's where Stillwaters came from. You guys are big water skiers. You were looking for Stillwater. And his 4-H daughter at 11 or 12 said, you can't call it Hoover's, Dad. You got to come up with something cooler. So
Stillwater's Hoover might not work. So that's where the name Stillwater's came from. Yeah. So this is, we were talking earlier in one of the sessions in regards to my varietal correctness. So this is a blend. This is a chance for me to have a lot of fun. And so we grow Bordeaux and Rhone varietals here in Stillwaters primarily. And so this is one of those red grapes that we can then say, okay, we've got some Syrah, we've got some Mourvedre, we've got some Grenache. I'm a breakout kind of maverick guy, so if I put Malbec in it, it's no longer a GSM, and so that's why we don't call it GSM.
Which is kind of what everybody's making these days.
I don't want to have that restriction. I don't want to be able to say, okay, we're going to do that. So what I do here is we take the special barrels. The barrels are all based on the pick date, and so this is a special bottle of wine, which what we do is, so this Syrah, for example, which is 2011, this happens to be a 2010. This was picked on October 22nd. And you notice here, this was picked on the 17th. And if we went around the room, we'd have a Syrah maybe picked in November. So we never know what was that very, very special date. And so when we bring all the barrels in and then start tasting them, by the time the wines are 2-3 years aged in these barrels, we start to say, wow, that was pretty cool. And because the bouquet, even when we pull the bung off the bouquet, and so what our blends are, is a chance for me to take special dates, special things,
That works.
special stuff, and blend it together. And yeah, so this is expressions. This is actually, and it isn't just because it was easy, this is 3 barrels, 1 Syrah, 1 Grenache, 1 Mourvèdre, and that made this wine. So this is a really fun wine. My favorite dish with this wine, I mean, people that tell me I don't drink white wine or I don't do this or I do that, but so salmon. I love fish. I love to be able to drink a red wine as I get into my later parts of the evening. And so, but I'm usually going to be pretty sensitive about what I'm going to pair with salmon. I had a guest yesterday that said, oh my God, I just brought home some steelhead from Alaska that I caught, you know, fresh. And wouldn't this be great? And I'm like, absolutely. And so trout. Mountain trout, you know how much I love the Sierras.
Yeah.
And so if I'm going to cook some trout over the barbecue, and I want to kind of protect the delicate nature of that fish, but I want a red wine. I mean, I want a red wine as I get into the evening. And so this Mourvèdre is beautiful for that. And so that's what I do.
Listening to that, Iowans and Minnesotans, as you head into fishing season, this is a great fishing wine.
Yes.
Check it out. It's just great. This is unfortunately not part of the mix shipment, but it is available in our online store, and it's part of the red only shipment. And it's available at Stillwater, so cheers.
Cheers.